Today on Stock Charts in Focus, we're putting those moving averages to work, exploring some of the different style and custom configuration options that you have available to you. Now, specifically, we're going to use those options to create some unique chart visualizations using those moving averages. Now, these are going to be things that you might not have seen before, some creative uses that are going to help bring a new perspective to your analysis. So lots of fun today as we dig into the moving averages, do some unique things with them. Plus, we got a new spring special launching this weekend, a great time to save on StockCharts membership. So we're going to give you all the details on that as well. Lots to cover on the show today. Of course, you know what it is. It's all new. It's all here. It's StockCharts in Focus. All right, my friends, welcome to the show, Stock Charts in Focus. Of course, our product focus show here on the channel where we dig into the site, dive into the features, show you around the tools, and ultimately help you get more value out of Stock Charts. That's our mission here every Friday, 5 p.m. Eastern Time, up on the live channel, but also up on our YouTube channel after that, and of course the on-demand platform at stockchartstv.com as well. Lots of different ways to watch. I'm your host for the show. My name is Grayson Roze, Vice President of Operations here at StockCharts.com, and it is great to be with you, especially today as we missed last week's episode. Some of you might have been looking for last week's episode. We actually had to cancel that because unfortunately I was out sick with COVID, so you might still hear a little bit in my voice. I've got a little bit of that sicky tunnel voice here going on. But I am very thrilled to be back with you for another episode of the show. Always one of the highlights of my week when I get to sit down and talk to you guys like this. So definitely feels really, really good to be back in action here with you for another edition of Stock Charts in Focus. Now, especially today's episode, this is going to be a fun one. We've touched on a couple of these concepts in the past, might have even showed off some of these ideas and some of these charts that we're going to look at today. But we're going to have a lot of fun customizing our moving averages on those charts and looking at some really interesting different ways to use these moving averages customized in some fun ways to visualize things from a different perspective. Some of these charts that we're going to show today are things that I actively use in my own approach to the markets, and I always find that they help me bring, like I said, a different perspective, a little bit of a different perspective to whatever I'm looking at. The other great thing is that the charts that we're going to look at today can be used on indexes, they can be used on individual stocks, they can be used on sectors. Anything that you're using moving averages on, you can use these tricks and tips and ideas. So we're going to have a lot of fun setting up these charts today, and these are some takeaways that you're going to be able to bring with you into the future and apply to all those different securities that you are analyzing. So we got a lot to jump into. Now, before we do that, I do want to give you guys a little bit of a heads up. Coming this weekend, we've got a spring special that's going to be launching on the site. So some of you might know, our longtime members especially might know, we do these specials from time to time, typically only at year end, but occasionally we do one in the spring, in the summertime, kind of around that time frame. So we're doing that this year. We decided, you know what, we got some crazy things happening in the market, and so we want to give everyone something to smile about at least. And so we are going to be launching a spring special starting this weekend. Our longtime members know, our longtime members will tell you these are the absolute best times to sign up for Stock Charts. Whether you're absolutely using the site for free, whether you're not a paid member currently, or even if you are a paid member and you want to extend your membership out into the future, you can do that at a reduced rate when we run one of these specials. So we're going to be doing that until the end of the month. That is going to be starting this weekend, starting on Saturday. We're going to launch that special, and we're going to run that through the end of the month. So a very limited time, but it is a great time to save. The deal that we're going to be running is up to 2 months of free service. So if you sign up for 12 or you extend your membership out into the future for another 12 months, we're going to throw in 2 on top of that. So you're going to get 14 months for the price of 12. If you want to sign up or renew for 6 months, we're going to throw in 1 on top of that. So 7 months for the price of 6. So it's a great deal. Again, something that we really only run in very short periods of time during the year. Typically Cyber Monday, holiday season around then. but occasionally we do one of these specials in the spring. And so we're doing that this year, just with everything going on in the market, all the craziness that we're seeing there. It felt like the right time to do one of these specials. So we're going to have more info for you on that next week as well. We'll show off some of the pages, show you how to access that special and everything. But just a heads up, keep an eye out on the site. We're definitely going to have lots of banners up and things like that. There are going to be buttons that you can click. And starting this weekend, you'll be able to go to stockcharts.com/special to take advantage of that special pricing. There's also lots of details that will be up on that page once it launches, FAQs and things like that. So if you've got questions, there's going to be a lot of info for you on that page. But also, you can reach out to our support team at any point. They are there to help. You can go to stockcharts.com/help to get answers to those questions. We are standing by, always here to help answer questions. So if you've got anything, just shoot a message to our support team. But definitely a great time to sign up, a great time to renew, whether you're a free user at the moment or currently a paid subscriber. These specials are definitely the time to sign up or renew. So look for that starting this weekend. And again, only running until the end of the month. So for all three of our different service levels, basic, extra, and pro, we're running the same deal, that extra 2 months of service if you sign up for 12, or an extra month if you sign up for 6. So keep an eye out for that. That's going to be here until the end of the month. So with that little bit of housekeeping out of the way, let's jump over to the site, get into today's show, and have some fun playing around with these moving averages. All right, everyone. So we are going to do today's show out of ACP because it's a nice kind of interactive place to do this. But before we get really up and running, I do want to let everyone know the same ideas, everything that we're doing here in this show, they all apply over in SharpCharts as well. So regardless of which charting platform you're using, you're going to be able to do all of these same things. The buttons and the menus and things are slightly different over in the SharpCharts world, but the concepts, the ideas, everything is the same. So if you're familiar with SharpCharts and you're working out of that platform, you're going to be able to do all of these things over there as well. You can set these charts up in exactly the same way. Before we jump into the 4 charts that I mentioned, like I said, we're going to take a look at 4 different chart setups using these moving averages in some creative ways that I want to make sure you're aware of. Before we do that, though, I want to just review some of the different style options that we do have for these moving averages. So I've got a chart up on the screen that's basically just stripped out. This is actually going to be sort of our starting place for the show today. This is actually going to be basically chart number 1. But before we kind of dive into all the details of everything that's up on the screen, I do want to review the options that you have available to you as far as style and custom configurations and everything go, the things that we're going to be using to set up our charts on today's show. So when you come to ACP, for instance, you can come over to that Add Indicator menu on the left side, as long as you've got your chart settings menu open on the left side of the screen. You find your moving average. This is going to apply to any of the different types. Now we're using kind of a combination at the moment of exponential moving averages and simple moving averages. Regardless of what moving average type you use, you're going to have these same style options. So all of that, all the concepts and everything, they also apply for different moving average types. But once you sort of find your moving averages and you add those to your chart, the settings panel is going to pop up. When you find one over here in the Add Indicator menu and you add that to your chart, the thing that's going to pop up is your settings menu. So the Edit Indicator menu for a moving average here in ACP looks something like this. Again, all these options are available in SharpCharts as well, so just keep that in mind. Now we've obviously got our top configuration, things like our period, what period we want the moving average to be. In this case, we're looking at a 50 period simple moving average. We can also offset those in a couple of different ways, and we can choose what that moving average is calculated from. But specifically, what we're reviewing here today are some of the style options. So we're going to kind of start here with this style box. So in that style box, if I open up this menu, what you can see is that you have a whole bunch of different options. Now, when you first add this, it might be selected on auto, but you do have a couple of other options that we want to run through. So a couple of different solid line options here. If you want kind of the default, the standard thickness, You've got a solid line option. Pay attention, by the way, to this red line on the screen. That's the one that we are editing at the moment. Wrong menu. We've got a thin option. So you can see when I select that, this line gets a little bit thinner. And we've got a thick option, which is actually what we started with. So that's going to be the thickest line option. So a couple of different options there for styling our moving averages as a solid line. Now we've also got dashed line options in here, and we've got the same kind of setup. We've got sort of a standard thickness for our dashed line. But we've also got a thin dashed line, which you can see actually is in use by some of these other moving averages. And we've got a thick dashed line. So depending on kind of how you want these to look, if you want your moving averages to be just a line, you've got solid and some different thicknesses there, or you've got dashed and some different thicknesses there as well. Now you've got three other ones that are pretty interesting. One that's kind of similar to a line is the dots option. So if you like the look of these kind of dots options, you can do that. That's just going to put a dot at that moving average value for each day or each week, depending on the chart that you are looking at. You've got an area option, which is a very interesting one and actually one that we're going to use later in the show. So that's going to give you that line, but it's also going to shade everything below that line. So it gives you kind of that area look for your moving averages. And then finally, you do have a histogram option as well. So that's actually going to be basically a bar for each day. It ends up printing somewhat similar to the area view. So, depending on the setup that you're using, those two look kind of similar, but you do have that histogram option as well. So we're going to put this back to be a solid thick line. Again, that's kind of where we started. Now, next up, we've got our opacity slider, and then we have obviously our color option. So we'll start with the color option because that one is nice and quick. When you open this up, you just give that square a click. You can choose any color. If you wanted to even type in a color that you have in mind, if you have the hex code for that, you can even type that in right there. But you've got all these different color options in here, and you can use these sliders to change things around. You actually have an opacity slider in here as well. So if you want to sort of change the transparency, you can do that with this slider right in the color picker. But we've also broken that out, and you have a separate opacity slider up top here. So you'll see in this case, we have this set to 0.8. We can slide this all the way down, and that line is going to become much more transparent. So opacity is basically the transparency of this line. If we put it all the way up to 1.0, that means it's going to be a full, thick, bright color. In this case, a full, thick, bright red. If we put this all the way down to 0, you can see that that line is now gone. It's effectively removed from the chart because it's fully transparent. So that kind of runs us through the key style options that we have for these moving averages. Again, we've got our line type, solid, dashed, area, all of those good things. We've got our opacity slider here to kind of change the visual, and then we've got our color picker down below that. So that runs us through some of the setup options that we have for these moving averages. Now, again, we've done this with a simple moving average in this case, but if we were doing this with an exponential or a double or a triple, any of the other moving average types that we have here in, for instance, ACP, all these same sort of style and configuration options are available in there as well. So that takes us through some of the sort of setup there. And now you've seen kind of how to get these moving averages onto your charts, and we've reviewed a couple of the different sort of display options that you have available to you. So like I said, we're going to review 4 different charts on today's show. Now, these are 4 moving average specific views, 4 different ways to customize these moving averages using some of these style options that we've already reviewed. And again, the idea here is that we're gaining a different perspective. We're using these moving averages to tell us something about the direction of price and to get kind of an interesting visual that we wouldn't otherwise get just by looking at price or by looking at a more complex chart that's got a whole bunch of different things on it. So the first one that we are going to start with is actually the chart that we have up on the screen. This, for me, this is what I call my level 0 chart. This is kind of the most basic chart that I look at. Occasionally, I do look at a chart that's got all of the moving averages removed, so it's just the candlesticks. But for the most part, this is kind of the most basic, the first chart that I will look at when I'm looking at a specific security. We're going to look today at VTI, which is a market tracking ETF, tracks the total US stock market. But again, all of these concepts, all these different chart setups that we're going to look at, these are things that you could use with really anything. If you wanted to look at them on a sector ETF or on an individual stock or even a cryptocurrency, anything that you're using moving averages for, you can use these different setups that we're going to review today. So on my level 0 chart, you'll see that we have a whole bunch of moving averages, but we've got some different style options on this chart. So we're going to run through those now. Up here in the top left corner of the chart, you can actually see the different moving averages that we have. So EMA is the exponential moving average. The rest of these are all going to be simples. That's why they are SMA. So we've got a 20-period exponential moving average. We've got a 50-day simple moving average, a 100-day simple moving average, a 200-day simple moving average, and then finally a very long-term 400-day simple moving average. So we've got a whole bunch of moving averages on this chart. The kicker, though, is that they're not all the same. I don't treat these moving averages in the same way, so visually, I don't want them to be the same. So this is where some of these style options can really help you set up a bit of a kind of a visual hierarchy to your indicators. We've talked about this on the show actually in the past. We've talked about using some different style and opacity options around your charts to kind of create a visual hierarchy. So we can do the exact same thing with our moving averages. What I mean by visual hierarchy is that some moving averages are going to be more important to us than others. For instance, for me, the 50-day moving average is an incredibly important one, and the 200-day moving average is also an incredibly important one. To me, those two are much more important than things like the 20-day or the 400 period, the 400-day moving average. So I want those to really stand out. I want those to, as my most important moving averages, I want those to kind of grab my attention first and foremost ahead of any of the other moving averages on my charts. So those are sort of the higher ranked visual hierarchy. The other moving averages on my charts that are important but a little bit less important to me, I want those to be a little less weighty visually. Those are kind of lower down in that visual hierarchy. So what I've done is actually modified the style of these different moving averages to kind of fit the way that I want to prioritize them visually and mentally. So as you can see, we've got all of our moving averages lined up here, but with our 20-day, what I've gone ahead and done is changed this one to be a thin dashed line. So instead of that being a solid thick line that's going to really jump off the page, jump off the screen, I've changed that to actually be a dashed thin line. Now I've also reduced the opacity here. So this is at 50%. If I dial this all the way up, we can see that that blue line, if you're looking at it, that gets a little bit brighter. But when I dial that down, it's just a little bit more faded out on my chart. So in addition to being kind of a thin dashed line, I also fade out that color just a little bit so that it doesn't jump off the page quite as much at me. Now, the next one up is going to be that 50-day simple moving average. And in this case, this is the one that we were looking at before. Like I said, this is an incredibly important moving average for me, for my approach, my time frame. So I want this one to really jump out at me. I want to really be paying attention to the 50-day simple moving average. So in this case, I've changed that one to be a solid, thick line. And I have dialed down the opacity just a little bit, just so it's not quite as bright. In my case, I actually use the exact same red for my candlesticks as I do for this moving average. So dialing down the opacity kind of helps so that those things don't step on each other as much. But I've dialed down that opacity just a little bit to 0.8, as you can see. If I put that all the way back up to 1, it just gets a little bit brighter. Personally, I just kind of like the look of it at 0.8. But it's very obvious that this is a brighter, thicker, sort of more weighty moving average for me versus that 20-day that is kind of, again, faded out just a little bit by being dashed and also having that opacity dragged down. So I use these style options to make sure that that 50-day moving average really jumps out at me. Now with the 100-day, I've done the exact same thing as that 20. I've changed that to be a thin dashed line with 0.5 as the opacity. And in this case, I've made this one orange. You can see, as you've probably already noticed, all of my moving averages are also different colors. That's another way that I kind of build in that visual hierarchy. So I've made this one a thin dashed orange line and kind of faded out that opacity as a little bit as well. Set that to 0.5. Now, next up is my 200-day moving average. So again, this is an incredibly important one to me, as well as many other technicians. So I want this one to really jump off the screen. I've made this one a bright, thick green line, just like that 50-day, just like that red line. So here, solid, thick in the style menu, 0.8 in the opacity there. And then finally, we've done the exact same thing with the 400 period. We've faded that one out just a little bit. So that is another thin dashed line and 0.5 on the opacity. So what this does for me is it allows me to have those moving averages, those other moving averages on my charts, but without cluttering it up quite as much. It means that there's, again, a little bit of visual hierarchy to my chart. So I want to keep an eye on the 20-day exponential moving average, but I don't want that to really dominate the screen. I don't want that to kind of get in the way of my other analysis, the other analysis that I'm doing. I don't want that to kind of muddy up my thinking. So by having this kind of faded out as a thin dashed line, I find that it helps me really kind of prioritize the 50 and the 200 over some of those other moving averages like the 20, the 100, and the 400. So this is our first stop on today's show, taking a look at how you can actually just use these style options to kind of set those moving averages up visually in the right priority order for you. If you've got moving averages that are more important, make those solid, make those thick, make those bright colors. If you've got moving averages that you want to keep an eye on, but you want those to be just a little bit less important, a little less visually dominating, again, make those thin lines, maybe fade out those colors. You've got lots of different options for setting those up with kind of a lower visual hierarchy on your charts. So our second chart that we're going to take a look at is something that I like to call my moving average focus chart. To pull this up, we are actually going to jump over to our chart styles menu, because like I said, some of the charts that we're taking a look at today are actually things out of my own approach, things that I use. So I'm going to cheat here just a little bit to pull this up really quickly, but then we'll take a look at exactly how I've set this up. So the idea here behind the moving average focus chart, again, I've got moving averages for me on a daily chart that are much more important than everything else. For me, just like many other technicians, the 50-day is incredibly important and the 200-day is incredibly important. The 50-day, kind of that intermediate term moving average for my time frame, and the 200-day is kind of that longer term moving average for my time frame as well. So we can look at the chart that we were just looking at, the one that we just had up on the screen that's got the price bars and it's got all those different moving averages. And sure, we can try to tell ourselves, okay, really focus on the moving averages, focus on the 50, focus on the 200-day. What are the directions of those? What are those moving averages telling us about the direction of price and trend and all of that good stuff? We can do that. But what I find is that when you really kind of make those bright colors, make those thick lines, the more that you can make them kind of visually dominate the chart, the easier it is to really focus on those moving averages. So again, that's the idea behind the sort of visual hierarchy, with some being thin lines and some being thick lines. So I've taken that one step further here with this moving average focus chart. What we've done is we've taken a very similar chart. We've just got 3 moving averages on this one. In this case, the 50, the 100, and the 200. And we've used that same concept. We've got our solid, thick, bright red line for the 50, and our solid, thick, bright green line for that 200-day. We do have our 100 on there just to kind of keep it in the mix there, but that one is still a very dulled out orange thin dashed line there. You can see that kind of in the middle of the screen. But we've got those same moving averages from before. And with this moving average focus chart, what I really want to make sure that I'm doing is focusing on those 2 moving averages that are so key, making sure I'm focused on the direction of those. So to make that a little bit easier to see, to make it easy to focus on those moving averages, I've basically faded out the price bars behind those moving averages. This allows me to really focus on the direction of these moving averages. So when I'm pulling up something like VTI, which is the total market, and I'm trying to say, okay, what's the intermediate term trend here? What's the long-term trend? What are those directions? It's really, really easy to see that on this chart because there's less getting in the way. Because I've faded out those price bars, I'm sort of filtering out the noise and making it really easy to see that In this case, that 50-day red moving average, which is bright red on my screen, a nice thick line, it's really easy to see that the intermediate term trend here for VTI, for the total market, is very clearly down. This line is very obviously going down, and I can see that. It's easy to focus on that. We can also see that in this case, the long-term moving average, that 200 period, is fairly flat, but really starting to roll over, and actually has been turning down and is now really pointing lower as well. So we can see that both of these are starting to move lower, not just that intermediate term trend, but also that longer term trend as well. So setting this chart up in this way with that those two moving averages that are important to me, really, again, allows me to focus on those moving averages. To set up this chart, it's very easy. We've already taken a look at how to set up those moving averages. We use the exact same tricks. So we're setting up that 50-day, for instance, with a solid thick line, bright opacity. In this case, we've got our same thick red. We're going to do the same thing for our 100 period. We're going to set that up with that thin dashed line, and we're going to set up that 200 period in exactly the same way with the bright thick green line. The next thing, though, that we're going to need to do to set up this chart is fade out our price bars. So to do that, we're going to click on the primary price label, or just to show you exactly how this works, if we're back here in that chart settings menu, we can also click the gears icon right up at the top. That's going to get us into the menu for all of the chart settings for this chart kind of globally. This is where we have all of our different candlestick settings. So you can see that all I've done is I've gone in here and I've changed all of these to be a very low opacity. I've dragged this opacity slider down to make these a little bit more opaque. As you can see, when I drag this down, when I drag this up or down, those colors for those candlesticks start to change. Now we've got a whole bunch of different configuration options in here for our candlesticks. But we can drag that down. We could drag all of these down, the opacity sliders, all the way down to kind of fade out those price bars. So that's all I've done to fade out those price bars. There's no trick to this. I'm not setting this up in any sort of crazy way. I'm just using a standard chart very similar to what we had before. And then I come into those candlestick settings here in that chart settings menu and just fade out some of those colors. Now, I could take this one step further here and fade out those price bars entirely. I could even come up to the chart type and set this to be invisible so that those price bars would be gone. Personally, I do like to still be able to see them, kind of like we have with that 100 period moving average. I like to be able to see that, but I want the focus, again, to really be on the intermediate and the long-term trends here. In this case, the 50 period moving average and the 200 period moving average. So I've actually left these price bars slightly visible. It's easy to see that here. We've still got those price bars on the screen. I've just faded them way, way, way far out so that they really aren't dominating the chart as much as they are if they're kind of full color. So very easy to set this up, though. All you've got to do is, again, come in, give that a click to get here to the full settings menu, scroll down to your candlestick settings, or if you're using bar charts or any other chart type, you just scale down those opacities and those color pickers, and that's going to fade those bars right out on your chart. Allows you to set up one of these moving average focus charts, as I like to call it. So that is our second chart for today. Again, using those moving averages to kind of gain a different perspective, styling your charts in a creative way, again, to just gain a different perspective or keep yourself focused on a specific element of the chart. In the case of our moving average focus chart, that's really what we're doing. We're not changing the chart at all. We're actually just kind of fading things out and highlighting other parts to keep ourselves focused on the right part of the chart for that purpose. So we're going to do something kind of similar with our third chart. Now I'm going to cheat here again. I'm going to actually pull up a chart that I've already created, again, because I've saved these as chart styles. These are chart styles that I come back to and use with many different securities. By the way, if you want to set any of these up here in ACP and then save a chart style for it, you just got to get that chart set up, come over to the paintbrush icon, look at the bottom of that panel and hit Save Chart Style, that big green button at the bottom. You can update an existing one or save something as a new chart style. All you got to do is enter a name in here. So as you can see, I have created chart styles for my moving average focus chart, for instance. And the next one that we're going to do is our 5 versus 200 chart. So a similar concept here. Now, in this case, we are actually using something that I just mentioned. This is our invisible chart type. So we're using the exact same symbol. We're using some moving averages on this chart. And as you can see up here at the top, I've actually set up this chart type with the invisible chart. So that is going to hide the price bars entirely. So the idea behind this chart is kind of similar to that moving average focus chart. We're trying to gain a little bit of a new perspective, and we're trying to filter out some of the noise. Again, by kind of blurring out or dulling out those price bars on that moving average focus chart, we filter out some of the noise from the daily movements, and we're really left just focusing on the moving averages. We're taking that one step further here with the 5 versus 200 chart, something that I actually picked up from one of our contributors, one of my favorites around the site. Arthur Hill has talked about this many times in the past as a way to filter out noise. What we're doing here is that we have a chart with hidden price bars. We've set this up again with that invisible chart type, and we've got 2 moving averages on this chart. We've got a 5-period moving average, and we've got a 200-period moving average, hence the name 5 versus 200. What the 5-period moving average does is gives us a look at kind of the current price action, current trading action, but filtered out a little bit. We're averaging things out over the last 5 trading days. So this moving average is still going to jump around a ton. As you can see, this is a very volatile line. It's going to move up and down quite quickly, but it's not going to move with the same sort of speed as rapidly, for instance, as the price bars themselves. Again, this is a 5-day, in this case, we're looking at a daily chart. So this is a 5-day moving average. We can compare that to a long-term moving average like the 200 period. So Arthur has talked about this many times as a great way for you to kind of time the market, if you will. Again, that 5 period is all about filtering out noise, and that 200 period is a long-term average. So when you filter out the noise with the 5 period and you compare it to the 200, you're left with a pretty interesting kind of market timing signal. Now, I use this for a variety of reasons. We're not going to really get into all of that on the show today, but what we are going to talk about is how to set up this chart, because it's a fantastic visual. Again, allows you to kind of filter out some of that short-term noise, focus a little bit on the zoomed out view there, but still compare that to any of the other moving averages that you want to see. The interesting thing that we've done on this chart is we're using another of the style options that we reviewed at the start of the show. In this case, we're using the area style. So we're going to jump in here to our 5-period moving average, take a look at how we set this up. This is using, just like our 50 days on the charts that we reviewed already, this is using a solid thick line, as you can see, and we've got the opacity on that set all the way up to 1. In this case, we're using a bright blue for our 5-period moving average. Now, next up is our 200-period moving average, so 200-day moving average. These are both simple moving averages, by the way, but you could, again, use this with any moving average type that you want. In this case, we've set the opacity down just slightly. We've got our solid green, just like the charts before. If you remember back, those charts before were using a green line for the 200-day moving average. So in my case, I'm still using a green line here for the 200-day moving average. We've set the opacity down just slightly, just like we did before with our 200-day moving average. So we've got that set at 0.8, so it's not bright and solid and really kind of standing out on the chart. By the way, if we did make that full opacity, that's kind of what it looks like. So I like it just dialed down just a little bit visually. But then what we've done is we set that up as an area. So the area moving average is going to shade everything again below that line. So it makes it very, very obvious to see where this moving average is. Now, again, what we're looking at in this chart type, in this chart style, we're looking for when that 5-period moving average, that kind of noise filtered moving average, crosses below that 200 period. So by setting up that 200-period moving average as an area, we see that that sort of space below the 200. It makes it very easy to tell when that 5-period crosses below the 200. It's just really easy to see when that blue line dips into the green space. So this is how I've set up this very unique visual here with the 5 versus 200. And I will say this is something that I've seen many other users do on their standard charts as well. So if we wanted to go back to one of those previous charts that we were using and use this same area style, again, it makes it really easy to see if price or if another moving average has dropped into that 200 period range, sort of dropped below the 200 period. Makes it really easy to see if it's in the area, it's in there, it's below there. If it's above the area, it's got that white space above. So nice visual there. nice different unique way to use the area style here for some of these moving averages. So that is our 5 versus 200 view. Again, very easy to set up. We've just got our invisible price bar, and then we've got our 5 period, and we've set up our 200 with that area style. So now we are going to jump over to our 4th and final moving average view, which again, I'm going to cheat a little bit here. I've got a chart style saved for this. So we are going to take a look at our moving average ribbon style. So here we are on our moving average ribbon style. What's interesting about this is a stripped out chart, very, very simple with just one indicator on it. So we do actually in ACP here, we have an indicator called the moving average ribbon. So if we're back in our chart settings menu, we can come to our add indicator menu. We can actually type in moving average, and you'll see that we have down in the all indicators section, we have an indicator called moving average ribbon. So that's actually all I've done to create this chart. I've started with a very simple candlesticks only kind of view, and I've added one indicator to it. That is the moving average ribbon. When you add that chart, here is how it looks. You've got a couple of different setup options in here for the moving average ribbon. You can choose your shortest period, your shortest moving average. In this case, I've set my shortest moving average to be a 20 period. Again, because that's kind of the shortest moving average that I typically use on my charts. And then you set your step. So in this case, I want each moving average to be 10 periods more than the previous moving average. So this is going to create a whole bunch of moving averages on the chart kind of in one go. We're starting at the 20-day, and then the step tells us that each moving average is going to be 10 periods more than that previous one. So in this case, we're going to start with 20. The next one up is going to be 30. The next one after that is going to be 40. The next one is going to be 50. And the number of ribbons allows us to set kind of how wide that ribbon is, the number of moving averages. So in this case, we've got 10 moving averages with 10 periods in between starting at 20. That's how I've personally set up this moving average ribbon. Now you can also choose your moving average ribbon type if you want simple or if you want exponential, if you want that ribbon to move just a little bit quicker. In this case, I've left my ribbon as just a simple moving average ribbon. Makes it really easy to use. So from there, we've got a couple of different style options. Again, we actually can choose how we want this calculated. We've got a couple of different calculation options in here in ACP, and we've got some different style options in there as well. I personally like to leave my moving average ribbon just on auto, but if you did want to play around with some of the different line thicknesses or line styles, like the dashed line as well, or even the dotted moving average ribbon, you've got those options in there for you. Personally, I find that with this indicator, the auto style option works perfectly. Now we could get into some funky things like our opacity filters as well. We could fade this out if we wanted to get tricky. You've learned how to do that now from earlier in the show, so you could play around with that as well. Again, I leave mine with this specific chart style. I leave that opacity up at 1, and from there, the only thing left to do is set all of your colors. Now, by default, this is going to have that kind of rainbow shading. It works pretty well. I usually leave mine alone. I've got that rainbow shading in there by default, and that works well for me. But very, very easy to set up this indicator. You can see, and some of the style options and everything, some of the configuration options are very similar to what we've set up with those moving averages already. Now, the idea behind the moving average ribbon is that you're looking for expansions and contractions and rollovers. So this helps you see trend across a whole bunch of different sort of time frames, all in one visual. When that ribbon gets nice and tight, that means that things are contracting, prices are contracting. When that ribbon starts to expand, as you can see kind of back here in the back half of 2020, we saw that ribbon start to expand. Those moving averages all start to roll over and start to move in the right direction. We've got sort of the right order to those moving averages, with the short terms all above the long terms. Once you see that kind of expansion of the ribbon, that is a very bullish sign. So the moving average ribbon, there is a ton of literature, ton written about this, but it is a very, very interesting indicator. And especially if you're already using moving averages on your charts, this can be a really interesting visual. You can also play around with it in some very creative ways. So again, changing the number of moving averages in that ribbon, changing the step, changing where you want that moving average to start. So you could start from a sort of a longer period if you want. You could start from a 50-day, for instance, change that step so you could have sort of a longer term moving average ribbon. You could change it down to be maybe starting at a 5 period like we were looking at on that 5 versus 200. However you want to set this up, the moving average ribbon is a really interesting way to add a whole bunch of different moving averages to your charts and then visualize those together, how they're moving, not just against price, but also how they're moving relative to each other. So a very interesting indicator that we have built into ACP here, the moving average ribbon. That is our fourth and final chart for today's show. Now, before I leave you, I do want to remind everyone all these same options are available in SharpCharts, the same setup options, the same things that we're doing. So if you look at my charts that we have over there in SharpCharts, the charts that I use in SharpCharts, they're set up very similarly. I've got this same kind of visual hierarchy to my moving averages. I've got chart styles saved for the 5 versus 200 and for the moving average focus as well. I've got chart style saved for the moving average ribbon as well. That one is a little bit trickier to set up in SharpCharts. You actually have to configure that one yourself with all of the different moving averages, but it does give you a ton of control over that. You can set those sharp charts up with all the moving averages that you want and sort of create this ribbon for yourself. So some very interesting options. Everything that we've looked at today, everything that we've explored here in ACP, you can do all of the same things in SharpCharts as well. Want to assure everyone that you can do all of that. So with that brings us to the end of our show for today. Again, exploring some different style options, different configuration options for these moving averages. We've taken a look at a couple of things here that I use in my own approach every day, every week. Some interesting setups, hopefully, that have given you a couple of different ideas for ways to use these moving averages in some different ways. It's always fun to play around with these different style and configuration options that you have available to you. But most importantly, I find that this can be an incredibly powerful, again, kind of visual hierarchy, allows you to prioritize things in the right way. I find that when I started using these moving averages with those different styling options in some different ways, again, it helped me just kind of mentally think about my charts in the right way. Mentally, I know that I want to prioritize the 50-day and the 200-day over those other moving averages. And it was a little bit tricky to do that, though, when all of them have that kind of same visual weight. So by styling things in some of these different ways, by sort of playing around with the visuals, you're effectively tricking your mind into thinking the way that you know you want to think. You're setting up your charts to make it easier for you to think the way that you want to think. If you think about it that way, the visual hierarchy that we're building in with some of these tricks makes a lot of sense. So hopefully this has given you some great ideas, some fun ideas for setting up your charts, setting up those moving averages in some creative ways. Plus, some of these different charts that we're looking at, the moving average focus in particular, and that 5 versus 200, I find that they are great ways to visualize different securities, some really helpful new perspectives that you can gain by looking at some of those different chart types. So again, using moving averages in creative ways, that has been the theme of our show today, and hopefully you've had some fun doing that with me here in ACP. Again, all those same options available in SharpCharts. So regardless of which kind of charting platform, which world you are using, you can do it all here on StockCharts. I want to thank you, though, again, for joining me on the show today. I will be back next week for another episode of StockCharts in Focus. Again, remember, we do this show every Friday, unless yours truly gets COVID. We do this show every Friday, though, 5 p.m. Eastern Time, up on the live channel, also up on YouTube after that, and the on-demand platform at StockChartsTV.com. So lots of different ways to watch, lots of different ways to tune in, and ultimately just trying to help you get more value out of StockCharts. That's our mission here on this show. I want to remind everyone, too, before you go, that special kicking off tomorrow, kicking off this weekend, the 2 free months offer. Sign up for 12 months or renew your existing account for 12 months. We're going to throw in 2 months on top of that, absolutely free. Or if you want to sign up or renew for 6 months, we're going to throw in 1 bonus month on top of that. So that is going to be launching this weekend. Again, stockcharts.com/special is going to be the place to take advantage of that offer. But of course, we're going to have more info for you all around the site. We'll have banners up and buttons and everything. It will be hard to miss the special. I promise you, if you're on StockCharts, you will definitely see it. But of course, we'll also take another look at that next weekend. We'll actually have the page and take a look at how to take advantage of that special. So more to come on that before next week. So I want to thank you again for joining me on the show today. I'll see you next week for another edition of StockCharts in Focus. But until then, chart on, my friends.
Hey guys, Dave Keller here with StockCharts.com. Thanks so much for watching our video. If you enjoyed it, and we hope you did, hit the like button right below. Also, we have so much new content every day. Consider subscribing to the channel. Just hit the subscribe button in the video or right below. Thanks for watching. Stay safe. Have a fantastic day.